College can be viewed as an investment, and it's often said that you get out of it what you put into it. It's a time where a lot of growth happens and also where students' awareness expands. They're more cognizant of others around them, what they want their future to look like, and laws now play a crucial role in their everyday lives. And that's what my thesis is centered around. More specifically, I'm covering how knowledge on the subject of capital punishment influences college students' support or opposition. In the 1972 Furman v. Georgia case, Justice Thurgood Marshall had a notable remark, which is now known as the Marshall's hypothesis, and it states that information about the administration and effects of the death penalty would cause those who support capital punishment to reject it as unfair and ineffective. Professor O'Toole has done extensive research looking into the Marshall's hypothesis and explains why Justice Marshall's notes are so profound.
Thinking behind it is that there's a lot of misunderstanding from the people who make the decision, from state legislatures, the electorate that puts our state legislators in power, to the point that we're actually administering the death penalty. There's a whole lot of that process that isn't well understood by your average voter who makes the decision about whether or not their state has the death penalty. And so he hypothesized that if people knew more about the process, they might not be as overwhelmingly supportive.
After taking a look at this case, I was curious to know how this would look applied to college students, because their opinions on the subject matter since they will grow to be the future of this country. In my personal experience, prior to college, I had no opinion and very little knowledge on the death penalty. I was a minor and was hardly ever taking part in actions that would result in a consequence of capital punishment. Plus, I lived in a state that doesn't utilize capital punishment. My dad is a lawyer, but I had never spoken extensively on this topic with him because it simply wasn't relevant to my situation at the time. Fast forward a few years, I am now legally an adult, living on my own and getting an education. I'm now voting and making decisions for myself. I also now live in a state that the death penalty is a consequence for serious crimes. Again, death row is not a very likely situation for me, just being an average law-abiding citizen. But living in a state, a city, where executions take place miles from my college campus, and now interning at that very same place, my awareness was growing, and I felt my morals being called into question. What do I really think of capital punishment? Does my opinion even matter? How do I reach a conclusion? These were all questions circling my mind following the execution of Rodney Burgett, along with a Criminal Justice Week that was being held right here on the campus of University of Sioux Falls. Being a college student relatively new to this reality, I wanted to reach out to other students, see what they knew, and how they reached their opinions in hopes that this search would help me form an opinion of my own. College students' opinions on this topic are important for the fact that they are the country's future. They will go out and vote, and also make decisions that will affect a countless number of Americans.
My name is Taylor Stoltz. I am a sophomore.
My name is Michaela Shallow. I'm a sophomore.
My name is Clara Loveridge. I'm a sophomore.
My name is Rachel Boyer. I am a sophomore.
My name is Brina Fox. I am a sophomore.
My major is criminal justice and psychology.
And I'm a double major in criminal justice and psychology.
My majors are criminal justice and psychology with a minor in English.
And I'm a psychology and sociology double major.
And I'm an education and theology major.
Kirk Bloodsworth and sister Helen Prejean were two guests we were fortunate enough to have on campus during USF's CJ Week. They are both advocates against the use of death penalty.
Human rights, that human beings can never be identified solely with their actions, that everybody's worth more than the worst thing they've ever done.
Bloodsworth has an interesting story, being the first exoneree from death row in the state of Maryland. His name was cleared with a DNA sample. I was able to speak with him when he visited our campus.
I'm the executive director of Witness Innocence, so we advocate the abolition of the death penalty. So we fight for that alone. That's our main mission. We empower death row exonerees to become leaders in that fight, and I do that every day.
I've helped end the death penalty in Maryland, my home state. We don't have it anymore. Delaware, Connecticut, New Jersey, New York, New Hampshire just recently last year, and New Mexico.
He has both a book and movie that details the specifics of the case called Bloodsworth, An Innocent Man, and it shows just how awful his years spent on death row were. Sister Helen Prejean is popular for her book turned movie called Dead Men Walking. She's the author of a couple other books as well, but what's most impressive is how she has devoted her life to traveling the world and working directly with inmates on death row in powerful efforts to save their lives.
So we cannot accept that South Dakota is a death penalty state, but people are too good for that. And so what's it going to take? It's what it always takes to change our society. And that we can see it happening across the country. We are shutting the death penalty down, even in Louisiana. And so I want to encourage you and invite you to put your hand on a rope and start pulling and to take action. Join the South Dakota Coalition to end the death penalty. You know the best definition of justice on earth? It's just us. And it can be a stadium full of people at the first meeting. I promise you that. But when you're awake, you know it. And then the call comes. And it's action that solidifies us in our commitment. It's not just thinking about it. It's beginning to act. And then we get stronger because we're with the community.
There are two articles I looked at side by side. The polls, Capital Punishment, published in 1970, and Not Everyone Supports the Death Penalty, published in 2005. And they both contain Gallup polls surveying Americans and their views on capital punishment. When looking at the article published in 1970, the results showed that just over half of those interviewed voted in favor of the use of capital punishment. The results of the Gallup polls within the newer article showed that just under half of Americans now support the death penalty. From these two pieces of writing, one is justified in assuming that the public's opinion of capital punishment has decreased. And it's also fair to say that Kirk Bloodsworth and Sister Helen Prejean have done their part in educating American citizens, and in turn having a lasting impact on this nation in regards to the use of capital punishment. I then turned to students who had attended the sessions with those two influential advocates to see if their view of capital punishment had developed, changed, or stayed the same.
Before Criminal Justice Week, I would say my views on the death penalty, I didn't really think much of it.
I didn't really think about it, like I said. I didn't really have an opinion on it. I was pretty basically familiar.
I didn't really have a solid opinion on it.
My views have pretty much stayed the same.
I didn't think it was so complicated.
I would define my views as neutral. After this week, I would say it's something I've learned a lot from, and it's definitely something I've thought about more.
Death penalty needs to be saved for the most severe cases, the worst of the worst.
It's a conflicting issue, so I don't know, still want to get all my senses before I firmly stick to one.
It definitely changed my opinion a little bit. I think the death penalty there's logic to it, and I think that there's a reason why it was put there in the first place. But I also understand why, someone like Kirk would want it abolished because he went to prison for 9 years, something he didn't do.
I think that capital punishment is used oftentimes in the right ways.
I can see why the death penalty is good, and I can see why it's bad.
But also it's been used in the wrong ways a lot of times with the faults.
I would say that I am leaning towards against the death penalty, just because this week taught me a lot about it, and not only the things that are wrong with it, but just the effect that it has on so many people in so many different ways.
Some arguments made in favor for the use of capital punishment include the fact that the convicted chose to be evil, and some people are a danger to society. The Bible does say an eye for an eye, and that every action has its consequence. On the other side, pushing to end all forms of death penalty, here are a few points and questions in response to those claims. For every 9 people put to death, there's 1 innocent person. What if there's a wrongful conviction? What if mental illness played a significant role in the case? Brian Stevenson writes in his book turned movie Just Mercy, the death penalty is not about whether people deserve to die for the crimes that they commit. The real question of capital punishment in this country is, do we deserve to kill? Here is what Bloodsworth has to say.
Well, that this is the ultimate of all sentences, and you can't pull it back. A former chairman of the board of witness sentences coined the phrase, You can free a man from prison, but you can't free him from the grave. Only God can do that.
At her presentation, Sister Helen Prejean shared a story about a jury member who had to vote between life and death.
When you hear the way it comes down and the huge number of mistakes we make, because when you have 4 people at trial that have a court-appointed attorney that don't have resources, how can the truth come out? Poor jury people. They're just citizens like us. You're going to come to that sentencing part of the trial, and you're going to go in and say, now we want you to go into that room and decide if this person lives or dies. It's on you. How, as human beings, can we ever be asked to take that? And I tell you the story in my second book, After Medicine, about a juror who went along. He didn't want to vote for death. He thought, well, when we get in the jury rooms, it'd be like, like a democracy, and we just don't talk about stuff, and everybody else give their opinion. Boy, he said they came down on me like gravy up. He didn't say gravy on rice, he said something else. Because the 4-person head just said, well, look, we're going to take a stroke. Let's just see how we've got to have a unanimous decision. The Constitution makes it hard to get the death penalty. Give out death. Everybody's got to be, it's got to be unanimous. And he said they were going around in circles and death, 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 death. And come to me and go, hey, I don't feel right about deciding to kill somebody. Give a guy a life, you know. It's not going to hurt you. Life's going to be a Christmas. Boy, they jumped on me. And the night Robert Sawyer, this was the man, it's a case in Louisiana, was executed. He called the night of the execution. He was drunk and he was crying. And he said, I tell my son, I tell my boy, son, stand up. Don't give the pressure around you. And so jurors that participate in these decisions, and people find out, we have 167 million people that were wrongfully put on death row. You just have Kurt Fletchway, the first people condemned to death in Maryland, the first one exonerated by DNA, got the wrong thing. It's not the jury's fault.
Looking at what the students said in their interviews, there are a few conclusions to be drawn from the response of the USF students. Their favor of capital punishment may have been a result of not having enough exposure to the world of capital punishment in the hour-long sessions where we heard from Bloodsworth and Sister Helen Prejean.
I mean, I think it's the conclusion I came to from listening to both of them. But I mean, granted, I don't have a vast knowledge of the death penalty, so I guess that's where I'm at right now with it, because I haven't dug deep into it. It's just from listening to those 2 people and their experiences with it, and just listening to them.
Studies have also found that opinions formed beforehand may be hard to overcome. I had also only interviewed a small number of students, which doesn't reflect the student population at USF as a whole. After conducting these interviews, I came across a study that affirms that information does in fact lower support for capital punishment. A study published in 2014 looked at college students and their support for capital punishment after reading factual statements about the topic. They took a pre-test and a post-test, and the results showed that favor wavered as the students became more knowledgeable on the topic of the death penalty. The research is more reliable and factual simply for the fact that they were able to take information from a larger number of students in a controlled setting while presenting them with adequate information on capital punishment. Their research is more reliable and factual simply for the fact that they were able to take information from a larger number of students in a controlled setting while presenting them with adequate information on capital punishment. I personally feel more confident in following their results over the few responses from my own interviews. Through this time of seeking and learning, I can confidently say my opinion lies in the realm of opposition to the death penalty. I still have questions, and I'm learning new things each and every day, but I don't think capital punishment is a just response to any type of convicted crime. I created this video to reiterate the importance of college students having an opinion. They are the future who will be going out as a part of society and shaping it through their actions, such as voting.
I think it is important to know about it and probably start getting a stance, because we do have the death penalty and it does affect people around us and everything. I just I think informing is a big part.
I think it's an important topic for everybody to think about at least sometime in their life, because like it is a thing that goes on in the world, the United States. It's just something that's very common, and I just think you need to think about like, oh, is this happening in my state? Or like, do I have an opinion on like people losing their lives, you know, like people like essentially kind of playing God and taking away someone's life. So I think it's something that everybody needs to think about, like if they were in like that position, like how they would feel, or if they'd like be trying to fight like, no, like this isn't right, or I just think everyone needs to think about it at least once if it's something they're for or against.
I think it's definitely important to have a stance because it's something that it might not affect you now, but it could affect you later. And it's something like it's a serious topic, especially like in today's time. Like it's a big debate that's been going on, and I think as a citizen, like we all have that right to believe what we want to believe and think what we want to think. And I think it's important to know your view on certain things, especially the death penalty.
I think it's good for us to know about it. Something like capital punishment is very important. And, you know, people, their lives are being put at stake, you know, like someone like Kirk. And so, you know, we want to fight for those people, but there's also people who should be put in prison for things that they did, like what Kirk was accused of. And so, such a hard topic, you know, it's so difficult, but I think people should, yes. I think people should read about it, should know about it.
But I think it's important because it is literally life or death. So it is something that citizens should at least be informed about and have somewhat of an opinion about.
This is why I'd like to stress to those who don't know or don't care to consider doing some research and developing an opinion of your own. This is what Bloodsworth has to say to those who are still trying to figure out where they stand.
I think it's an awful thing to kill somebody. So I would tell them that the possibility of killing an innocent person is great. That's the only thing we need to say that the death penalty is wrong. Not for the evil that men and women do or anybody does. It's for those that don't.